before we really discuss the plot, I think this movie begs the question, or, it begs for a discussion here. And I'm not sure this is a discussion I want to have with you. Okay. And I'm not sure it's a discussion that our audience wants to listen to. But is softcore pornography truly pornography? That's really the biggest question I think I have with Emmanuelle.
Well, here, because actually I was thinking about that as well. Because I think a lot of younger people, early 20s, I don't think they understand that there's different kinds of porn. And I don't mean like hardcore or like bondage, stuff like that. I mean like you had like softcore porn and then you had porn, right?
Right. Now, I didn't know this. I didn't know the difference between... because you hear the term hardcore. You don't really hear the term softcore a lot unless you, like, go out of your way to look for stuff. So I had never really known the difference until I saw some of the Emmanuelle movies. And apparently the difference, and there may be more than one difference, but the main difference I'm seeing is that in softcore pornography, you do not see the acts of penetration.
Yes, yeah.
I think in softcore porn, or maybe some softcore, maybe most softcore, they're not actually having unsimulated sex. I'm not certain of that. I don't think this was one of them, but I know some of the Emmanuelle movies, and definitely some of the black Emmanuelle movies, which I'm a huge fan of, are have both softcore and hardcore edits.
Okay.
And so I would imagine if a film has both a softcore and a hardcore edit, they're not shooting different sex scenes. They're just including shots, and they're editing it differently for the hardcore version than the softcore version. That having been said, I don't believe this had a hardcore version, so I don't think they're having unsimulated sex, but I'm not really sure.
This movie does cross a line, but I think the first sex that we see in the movie is Emmanuelle with her husband.
Yeah, and it's
classy.
Jean. It's covered by the nightshade they have over the bed. I mean, we get some close-ups and stuff, but like it's shot. It's a passionate sex scene, and there's probably more passionate noises being made than in like a normal drama movie that would have a sex scene. But it's not too dissimilar otherwise from something that would be in an R-rated film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I agree with you. It's shot in a classy way for the most part.
It is hard to distinguish kind of art from porn, or porn from art, I guess, at a certain level.
Well, it's been a huge issue in the Supreme Court has looked at this, and obviously everyone's talking about the Supreme Court now, at least when we're recording this. But, goodness, I don't know if this was a lawyer or a justice, and if it was a judge, I don't know if it was a Supreme Court justice, but there's the famous definition of porn. This was like a legal definition of porn in America. The definition was, I know it when I see it. And that sounds funny, and that sounds like a cop-out, but at the same time, it's pretty accurate, and it might be the best way to distinguish porn from art.
Yeah.
Which means it's completely subjective. And, and then I think something like this film, I'm not sure between the two. There's also, from the 1930s, I think the 1934 or so, there's the Supreme Court case, the United States of America versus one book called Ulysses. Of course, Ulysses being the greatest novel ever written. Mm-hmm. The worst mistake the American government ever made, in my opinion, was banning the book Ulysses. They seized imports of it because it was deemed pornographic. This was a book written in the teens and 20s, published in full in the 20s, published in parts going back to like 1916. There's a pretty graphic depiction of masturbation, and there's a lot of like sex stuff in it. Mm-hmm. But the Supreme Court ruled, and this was like an effort to distinguish art from pornography, and that art can have pornographic elements or pornographic details without being pornographic. And I think if we think of more modern film, you have something like the film Love from director Gaspar Noé, which came out probably about 10 years ago now. I think it's a terrible movie, first of all. Like, I'm not... but Gaspar Noé, for the most part, is a well-regarded director. He's, one of those artsy-fartsy kind of... I don't like him, but he's made a bunch of boundary-pushing movies, very European movies. I think he's from Argentina originally, but he makes, like, French movies and stuff. And so European movies equal lots of sex for the most part. We'll see that in Emmanuelle.
And drug use.
Well, I don't know if that's a specific European thing, but that's definitely a Gaspar Noé thing. Yeah. Well, and there is drug use in Emmanuelle, to be fair. But the movie Love has a lot of sex scenes in it, and it has unsimulated sex scenes. But that, by and large, I'm sure there's some people out there that consider it a pornographic film, but for the most part, that's considered an art house film, not a pornographic film, and yet it has features in it that have, for the most part, been regarded as being pornographic. I think another, going back to the 1970s, so this was the era of Emmanuelle, the porno chic era, as it's been described. Don't Look Now, with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. There is unsimulated sex in that, and that is regarded not just as an art house film, but as one of the greatest films of all time. It's an incredible masterpiece of what I'll call backdoor horror, kind of like Audition, where it's a drama for 90% of the movie, and then it becomes a horror movie. So there is a fine line, and it's a finer line than a lot of us might think between art and porn. And Emmanuelle is all over that line, really, to a point where I'm not really sure how I feel about it at the end of the day.
Well, you know what it actually reminds me of? I don't know if you're familiar with these, but when I was a young teen, staying up past bedtime,
Red Shoe Diaries?
Yeah, exactly, Red Shoe Diaries.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I'm familiar with what it is.
Yeah, it reminds me exactly of Red Shoe Diaries.
Red Shoe Diaries was a television show, but I think it was there were essentially, it's an anthology. I think each episode was essentially a movie, if that sounds right.
Yeah, yeah.
To my knowledge, simulated sex scenes, not genuine hardcore sex scenes, not shot in a hardcore way.
Very softcore.
But was still deemed pornographic in a way, in the softcore way. The other thing I want to mention, going back to legal definitions or whatever, but I was in a criminal justice class in high school, and this girl who I knew was in it, and she I think, I don't know what exactly was being discussed, but pornography in some way was brought up in how the criminal justice system looked at pornography, and she said something like nowadays Playboy isn't even really porn. When Playboy came out, it was like the pornography. It was like but now with all the stuff that's out there in the internet, and even like Hustler and some of the other pornographic magazines were far more explicit than Playboy.
Yeah.
Like Playboy is nothing. And I'm like, is Emmanuelle the Playboy to Deep Throat's Hustler? Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you brought up is really interesting, and I'd agree. I would totally agree.
So you've seen Deep Throat, is what you're saying?
I've seen bits and pieces.
No, yeah, I've never seen it, but
I've seen the important bits and pieces.
Yeah, so again, porno chic era, the 70s. Deep Throat was a big hit that came out in 72, 73, somewhere around there. I remember seeing something on TV years ago, and Deep Throat, it's a pornographic film. It's an X-rated film. It's a hardcore pornographic film, but it was like a big hit. Some estimates, and I think these are insane estimates, I think they're fucking wrong, but some estimates have it as like making more money than Jaws, but they couldn't really accurately like some say it was like the first blockbuster, really, but like I think because it played in theaters forever, and then Emmanuelle, by the way, it played in French theaters for like 13 years or something. Another kind of instance like that, but like I think they just didn't really have accurate box office takes for something like a Deep Throat. And then, but Deep Throat, I think, was the kind of the first real big one. There's also Beyond the Door with Marilyn Chambers. Linda Lovelace, I think, was in Deep Throat. Debbie Does Dallas was around this time. I think that's the mid-70s. So like all these classic, for lack of a better term, porno titles. And then Emmanuelle was kind of right in the middle of this, but it's this weirdo thing. It's French, it's European, which is another reason I think why we might tend to think of it more as an art film than porn, because it's a foreign film, and I at least watched the subtitle version. There is an English dubbed version, apparently. I learned that because the IMDb trivia said that Sylvia Christel, the actress, I think she's Dutch, she was apparently very upset that she was not reached out to do the English dub because she spoke fluent English. So it's like,
really?
I didn't even know there was a dubbed version, but